Hey guys, in this video, we're going to discuss anonymous LLCs and whether or not you should use one in your setup. All right, let's get started. Okay, so when it comes to anonymity, you've heard me talk about this a lot on this channel about the importance of setting up your structure with anonymity. Now, the deal is that anonymity doesn't work great in all situations. Now, it does have its positive benefits, and in fact, it works so well, there are a number of states now trying to mirror laws off the Corporate Transparency Act to get owners to actually share their information with the Secretary of State so they know who's actually behind the LLCs that are being created. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why they put forth to collect this information. Really, it always comes down to the state wants to know what your business is about, and they want to be all up in your business, but that's a different video. In this video, what I want to cover is why would you set up an LLC with anonymity versus when you would not want to use that. So what are some of the main advantages of using an anonymous limited liability company? Well, first off, it's going to be privacy protections, because here's the deal. When you have a business and it owns rental real estate, or you have any type of activity that owns a passive asset, why do people need to know that you have this business activity? What benefit does it help them to realize who the actual owner is of that particular company? So what an entity can do when you set it up, or an LLC that is, when you set it up with anonymity, it can basically protect you from harassment or unwanted solicitations or personal attacks from, say, disgruntled tenants. You know, as someone who's been working in this industry for 23 years, and I serve as the trustee of many, many land trusts that have been set up across this country, I receive at a minimum of at least 6 to 10 phone calls every single day, and that doesn't even count the text messages, because people assume that the entities that I've created for my clients are actually my entities and I own the property held inside of them. So by having anonymity, what you're doing is you're creating this smoke screen so people can't see through the entity to see who the actual owners are, so you don't have to deal with the same harassing phone calls that I get every single day, because you have a shield there to protect you. Now, the other benefit of having an anonymous limited liability company is going to be asset protection. So what do I mean by that? Well, by setting up your LLC with anonymity, it hides the fact that you own it. So if somebody was considering bringing a lawsuit against you, they may think twice, because if they ran an asset search, they're not going to see anything in your name. They're not going to think that you're worth going after. Or if they do proceed against you and they can't discover that you held assets or business enterprises, they most likely will settle for the insurance. That is, whatever your policy limits are, if that's the nature of the claim. I've had several clients involved in this type of situation before, where they had banks coming after them, they've had creditors coming after them, and these third parties who are bringing these types of claims, they can't find any assets. So they end up going into a settlement discussion, and my clients have walked away only giving up the policy limits of their policy and not any of their assets, because they were not discoverable. So the third benefit that comes from having an anonymous company, of course, is identity theft. I mean, it's a real problem right now. And if people don't know your personal details, they wouldn't be able to take over your company and say it's their company, because they can't look through it to find out who the actual owner is. So I think that's a valid reason to set up an entity with anonymity. And then the last point about having anonymity I think is important. It has to do with estate planning. So this is the thing, is that when you pass away, if you do leave creditors out there that after you've passed on, do you want them to know what assets you have? Or do you want some disgruntled heir to realize what you're worth and possibly bring an estate claim against your estate just to create problems for your actual beneficiaries, because they think if they push hard enough that they can force them to give up some money even though they're not entitled to it? I mean, it happens all the time in this country. So the thing about using anonymity in our planning is there is an estate planning benefit, that when you pass away, no one's going to know that you own these assets, so they can quietly pass to your beneficiaries. And this is also beneficial if those same beneficiaries who are receiving the assets are involved, let's say, in any type of litigation, or there's a creditor claim out there, then it doesn't hit the public record. So just how anonymity worked for you, it's also going to work for your beneficiaries, because when they receive it, that anonymity passes on to them. So I think those are 4 compelling reasons why you should set up a structure with anonymity. Now, you need to balance that against what you're looking to do. And that's why I say there's some bad parts about using anonymity, or when you should not use it. Now, number 1, when would I not want to use anonymity? Well, you can't because the jurisdiction in which you're creating the entity in does not allow it. So for example, if I was setting up a limited liability company in Washington State, I absolutely cannot create an LLC in Washington State with anonymity. So the state law prevents it. However, there's a workaround. If you watch my channel, you know that workaround in creating anonymity for a company in a state that doesn't recognize anonymity is to basically set up your LLC, let's say this is in Washington, and make sure that when you're creating that LLC, you've first established a Wyoming LLC. So when you create this limited liability company, you make this LLC member managed, okay, by your Wyoming limited liability company. So when I set up my Washington LLC right here, I tell the state of Washington, hey, this company down here is the owner. So if you want to, when you ask me to disclose who the members are, I'm going to disclose that it's a Wyoming LLC. Now, the thing about Wyoming, of course, as you know, if you follow my channel, and if you don't, you should start following it. I got lots of videos on this, that this Wyoming LLC that you own and you control, Wyoming does not collect any information on its members or managers. So as long as we keep pointing businesses back to this blue box, well, it's going to keep my personal information off a public record. So that's one area in which you wouldn't be using anonymity is if you didn't have a holding company there, well, you can't do it. Now, a second reason why it can be a challenge for people to use anonymity might be if you plan to go out and buy real estate directly in the LLC and you're using financing. Now, this can be problematic for people in the context that when the bank looks at a limited liability company that's going to take title to the property, what the underwriter is going to be analyzing with this LLC is they want to typically see you down here as the member, since you're the one that's going to give a personal guarantee on that loan. Because the thing about lending and with these with lenders and LLCs and taking title to the property, what they're doing is they're assessing who the actual owners of the LLC are going to be or who they are. I mean, it's no different than if you own the property, you're taking title directly in your own name. They want to assess their risk in making that loan, meaning do any of the owners of this LLC have any potential skeletons in their closet, financial issues, tax issues, creditor issues that may impair their ability to repay this loan or impact this property. So when you're using anonymity and you're setting up this LLC to take title to the property like this, and you've got your blue box down here like we just showed you, when the bank or the underwriter does their due diligence on this red box, again, let's use that Washington example, they're going to look at the Washington LLC and it's going to point them to a Wyoming LLC. So this just makes the process a little more complicated for them. And it can slow down your lending or the loan, which again, push back your closing. So if you have a deal that you want to close in an LLC, you have a lender that's willing to loan to the LLC, and you know you have to close by a specific date. Maybe it's a 14-day close because you got a great deal, negotiate yourself a great deal. Be careful in closing in an LLC with anonymity because it may screw that loan up and force you to get an extension. If the seller refuses to do it, well, then you've lost your earnest money. And of course, you've lost that deal. So here's what I tell people. If you're going to use an anonymity structure and you're closing on real estate in the name of the LLC, first talk to the lender you tend to work with. Make sure they understand what you're intending to do and you know ahead of time what they need as far as the entity is concerned, what they need to see in order to close to get them all of the information that's necessary. Okay, so another problem in using an anonymity structure like this is when you're running an active business. So let's say I've created a limited liability company here, and this active business, it's a contracting business. All right, so I've got my trucks here, and I want to go out there and I want to work with the public. Now, when you're dealing with third parties, many times what they're going to do is figure out whether or not you're a credible person to work with, right? If they're going to hire you. So you might have people that look at your company and they're expecting to see you as the owner of that company. But if they look at that company and they don't know who the owner is because you've set up a blue box here, so this company that we've set up in Washington, like contracting company, points to a Wyoming LLC, maybe that makes the parties that you're looking to conduct business with a little nervous, that they look at that company and think, all right, well, is there anything that they're trying to hide? And so I think in an active business context, when you're working with individuals, you shouldn't use anonymity to hide the fact that you're the owner, especially when you're holding yourself out as being the CEO, the president, the manager of that company. You're the owner of the company where it's your reputation on the line. Let there be transparency there. So in those types of situations, I think it works just fine. Do not use anonymity. Let there be transparency. But when it comes to holding assets, that's a whole different story. And so that's where I think anonymity should be used when we're holding on to real estate, rental real estate, or flipping property, or our savings account, or private lending, things like that. Go all in. Active businesses, it does not make sense. I mean, take Anderson, for example. You all know that my partner Toby and I created this firm. But how would that look if you looked us up to see, hey, who's really behind Anderson? And we had a complete anonymity shield there that you wouldn't be able to see who owns it. Those are the types of things you have to take into consideration when you're building your business and whether or not you want to use anonymity. Hey, if you got a lot out of this video, be sure to put some comments down below what you think about it. If you have any questions, you know I get on, I answer those questions on a weekly basis. And if you know anybody out there that is not yet a subscriber to my channel, hey, send them a link. Tell them to sign up because each time I cut a video, you're going to be notified of my latest release. All right, take care.